gotten one.
Well, okay, but Madam Chair, you talk about the policy that it takes, and we've been sitting from January till now not working on the policy it takes, so now we're up against a deadline and say, oh, we don't have the policy. And yet we start right after the cycle again, and we don't deal with the policy necessary.
Well, I don't know. The finance, has had since January, and they've had 3 years to think about ideas that would work, and so far nobody's given us one. So, I think everybody's open to, and like I said, the last time we did this, we actually did it. In 2004, we did it. But now everybody wants to throw out what we did in 2004 and start over. And, it's just hard on the policy side to do that. So, anyway. All right. This is open for immediate suggestion from any work group somebody can form. Probably. I don't know. It's just, I'm trying to get to the number, Senator Huff, but I don't know how to get there. Okay, so no, they are going to do the work group. They have to do the work group and report back to conference committee by whatever day somebody tells us. It'll give people plenty to do over the weekend. Something to keep everybody entertained. All right, page 4, the trailer bill, I assume probably has to stay open too. What is it? Leo?
Thank you. As you can see in your agenda, the Assembly adopted trailer bill language requiring the Department of Social Services to establish a cost-benefit model to evaluate anti-fraud activities going forward in IHSS and other social services activities going forward. Our compromise here is being passed out the language. It's actually supplemental report language laying out legislative intent that the department consider the costs and benefits of such proposals prior to presenting them to the legislature. Our reason here for going on SRL is that current law already requires a report back to the legislature on anti-fraud activities to date. Additionally, the fraud activities that we think were most likely to potentially have issues with cost benefits, that maybe were the best candidates for that kind of analysis, were already eliminated by both subcommittees. So those were the fingerprinting of recipients that you spoke of earlier.
Let's leave it off the other one who knows what trailer bill. Is that okay? Or you want to...
Madam Chair.
All right.
Madam Chair.
Sorry, Mr. Huff.
Quick question. If LEO could talk about what fraud activities were funded in last year's budget, what were included?
So there was sort of a package of anti-fraud activities funded last year. Some of that was related to provider enrollment processes, background checks for providers, fingerprinting of recipients. Additionally, there was things related to unannounced home visits for recipients maybe would be visited by an IHSS social worker. There was also fingerprinting on time cards was another piece. Additionally, there were state operations in both the Department of Social Services and the Department of Healthcare Services, positions established to investigate anti-fraud activities, those sorts of things. It's a very comprehensive list, and I don't know if you want me to go through each piece, but those are sort of the ideas behind them.
And just following up on a question the chair said earlier, she said we hadn't done anything. They'd been thrown out in court. Has everything been compromised on that, or did I?
This was one of the areas. That's why I went back and said there was some that is scored in the governor's budget as a savings already in the base that everybody's accepted. That is some of this. We did reject, I think, both houses, some things that had been part of last year's, and frankly, the Republicans on the Assembly side, I know, joined in that motion because it was a concern last year, and it became apparent this year that the cost of fingerprinting recipients versus the value that would provide was pretty not cost effective. And so that one was eliminated on both sides. The provider fingerprints are still going on,
yes.
The background checks and the training.
Yes.
And so, I mean, they've been trying to implement some of those pieces, and as far as I understand it, most of those have not been enjoined.
Well, I guess the follow-up question
those
is,
are the ones.
and this would be for finance, how do we score a savings if we've taken away these fraud prevention measures?
Well, we could go away the costs because they cost more than they were preventing.
But Senator Huff brings up the fundamental problem we have with the budget the way it is with the legislature's action. You're correct. We simply took out the cost of these activities and reduced the savings by the same amount. So we're still the budget still assumes a net general fund savings of $130 million, and we think that that's significantly overstated if you remove the two fundamental pieces of our comprehensive anti-reform package.
I'm trying to figure out why fingerprinting recipients in wheelchairs is going to save fraud.
Well,
Nobody got that, and some of the Republicans agreed it was a silly proposal. It was going to cost more money to implement, and more harassment, and more, just
so
for no value.
So it wasn't just the cost that was...
Well, it was partly the cost, and it was no value. I mean, and it's cost for no value.
Well, I guess that's determined. It goes back to my little heated speech from the other day about how we negotiate things and then they get thrown out in subsequent years. But I think it's difficult for us to score savings on this when we've thrown away the fraud prevention that
We didn't
thought
throw
was going to
away.
get us there.
We kept most of it. The only piece that everybody thought was really not very cost
The single
effective.
most significant one.
Fingerprinting recipients? What on earth are you trying? I mean,
And
how many counties can you run your wheelchair in?
Yeah,
I mean,
county,
I don't get it. Nobody could ever figure that out. And the cost of going to their homes and doing this was beyond any county's capability of figuring out how to deal with it.
The funding for the county district attorney or more broad county activities was removed as well, and we think that's a fundamental component.
They got $10 million this year. Tell me one of them that prosecuted anybody that spent it.
The counties were required to submit plans to demonstrate how they would implement anti-fraud efforts, and the majority of counties submitted plans that included activities that were ongoing. So the funding, if you provide the funding on a one-time basis,
and we see what the funding is. The one-time funding was for the plans. If we then see that and there's some value to funding them, that's different. But DAs are already getting more money than we are to start with. So.
And then there was the counties.
Then there's the counties. Yes. Anyway. But I mean, so it's not, I mean, they're admitting $160 million of it stayed in effect. The issue is, and so the so-called anti-fraud stuff, most of it is there. The only really problem one was this question of fingerprinting recipients. Finding out if they're dead or not is valid. Fingerprinting them made no sense for disabled kids and folks, and it was costing so much money, and nobody could figure out how to implement it in some way that didn't cause more trouble to counties than any of them thought they were going to save. I mean, that basically is what I think most of the subcommittees heard. It was a unanimous decision on the Assembly subcommittee side, as I understood it. So it is what it is. Elio, were you trying to say something, or are you just nodding your head? All right. Who else? Somebody else had their hand up. Sorry. All right. SSI. But we should give them this. I mean, they should understand this stuff. Whatever.
Let me just see, is there anything else?
Let me give them a copy of it. Well, I don't know, whatever, but, fix it up and get SSI. Same debate, 2 times over. When we get money. All right, Elio.
Thank you. The issue that's in conference here is really just a language issue. We have been recommending considering the costs and benefits of reversing the cash-out policy in SSI-SSP, or the policy that makes SSI-SSP recipients ineligible for federal food stamps. So we think the Assembly version here works.
But it's just supplemental report language. Is there anything we can do to figure this out sooner than waiting till next year to?
Well,
I mean, the problem is who's plus and who's minus, and can we save the pluses without losing the minuses, or however that works?
Yeah, there's a complete cash out. There was definitely some winners and losers. Some pure SSI-SSP households would gain food stamp benefits, while some mixed households may lose their food stamp benefits. But the administration recently in April submitted a letter to the federal government asking if we could do a partial cash out, and therefore only make those individuals who would benefit eligible for federal food stamps. And we received an interim response from the federal government, so they're forwarding our request on to Social Security Administration as well. So we're waiting to hear back from them on that. And so the Assembly's language here would start that and keep it open as if we get a favorable response from the federal government.
Madam Chair, and we would just point.
Well,
we would point out, even if you get over the hurdle of federal approval, to do a partial cash out, you're looking at savings on the SSISP side of approximately $22 million, and there would be increased food stamp administration costs by having these cases be food stamp eligible of approximately $17 million. So when you net those, you're talking about net savings in 10-11 of $5 million compared to $133 million that we assumed in May revision. So we just don't think there's significant enough savings here.
LAO had another suggestion that, I don't know, maybe if this is worth leaving open. I mean, I do think we ought to try to get an answer back as soon as we can on the ability to do that, because it does allow, for some room.
Right. And our recommendation
but yours
here
was the pass-through issue.
Right. It was our recommendation here to consider reversing this was in the context of a grant reduction as well. So to the extent grants are reduced for SSI, SSP individuals, we thought at that time it would be a good time to consider making some individuals eligible for federal food stamps at the same time.
No,
so
that's been the resistance to doing any grant cuts is because we didn't have that. And then when you see that some people are winners and losers, then you get back more away from it. I mean, the grant cuts are easier to handle if you know you're going to get food stamps. That is sort of like the CalWORKs discussion we had earlier. The bigger question that is always the savings that's been done in the past, which is everybody hates doing and is reluctant to do, but in cash times has been done in the past, is the one that you suggested, at least I think in sub, with respect to basically stealing the federal pass-through.
Right.
The federal COLA issue is where savings have been achieved in the past in this program on grants.
Right.
It's not a pretty thing to do. It's not really a right thing to do, but it does leave people relatively harmless.
Right. That would be an option in January 2011 when the SSI grant is increased. The SSP grant could be reduced by the same amount that the SSI grant increases, and that's considered the no pass, and you could achieve savings that way.
And just to clarify, that would be for individuals only, since the couples are already at the minimum.
Well, you can't reduce, I mean, you aren't getting any savings out of couples either because you're already at federal minimum. So, I mean, you're just cutting the individuals to a level that a lot of folks find difficult to think about how people would sustain themselves. And it's especially true when you start with the multiple cuts. I mean, you want to lower their food stamps, you want to lower their HSS, you want to lower their SSI, you want to lower their Medi-Cal benefits all at the same time, and you start getting the multiple hits on the single person that are troublesome until we sort some of this out. I don't know whether we just leave this open with IHSS or not. I mean, we could close on the assembly language, but I don't think it closes the issue, and I don't know how to, I don't know. Mr. Nielsen or Mr. Fuentes?
Madam Chair, I'd move the assembly language with the stronger trailer bill language. Sorry, the assembly
Which
version,
train?
the TBL.
What trailer bill?
Instead of the
I don't think we can go there yet.
report language.
Yeah, that's a little too hard. I mean, we're going to have to kind of do this cumulative analysis on people, and I'm not excited about doing the thing, but we're back to the problem of there really isn't enough money to go around. And Senator Dutton's point, for better or worse, is that we're going to have to find some place where we get these savings. And I think what we're trying to do, at least on this first round, is make sure we at least understand all of the consequences and possibilities and give direction so people can try to go give us creative options here. But till then, I don't know that we can close it.
But that's the point of this.
No, but we,
This is just a place they have control and can get savings if she comes.
all right. So we'll leave it open and see where we get to. Foster care. I think, and anybody who has access to appropriate federal authorities, see what you can do to get us an answer on the interim cash out, or tell us who we need to call to try to get it. I don't know. I heard the governor's going to Washington next week. He might want to check with somebody while he's there. All right, foster care. LAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm in Sun Park with the Analyst's Office. The issue in conference is really what level of resources the legislature wants to invest in a program improvement plan for the federal Title IV-E program, which, as you may know, is the major federal funding source for the state's child welfare programs. The Assembly rejected the resources requested by the administration for some improvement activities, whereas the Senate approved a reduced amount of $350,000 general fund. We think that given that the state is in a federally required program improvement plan and that future reviews of program eligibility could possibly result in increased disallowances of federal funds, that dedicating some level of resources to these activities makes some sense. Our understanding is that the administration has actually developed a scaled-back approach that requires less resources than the Senate approves. So I'll defer to them to describe that approach, but we would be supportive of that.
Finance?
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Wardlaw, Department of Finance. The scale-back approach includes all of the original components just at a scale-back level. I do have a handout that I'd be happy to share with you.
Okay. Here's the sergeant.
Sergeant.
They're not being ridiculous. If you want their scale back, then you could do it. Otherwise, you could do that.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Okay. As you'll see, the scale-back version provides for fewer training slots available for probation staff. Original proposal had 560 individuals would be trained. Under the scale-back approach, we'd have 175 probation staff. The original approach had 125 child welfare staff to be trained. Under the revised approach, 100 child welfare staff would be trained, and then we would have 25 additional staff would receive what's called training for trainers. Under the scale-back version, 15 folks would be having this training. The duration of the training would also be reduced from 2 weeks down to 1 week. We feel that this is would be acceptable per our program improvement plan that we have with the federal government. This all stems from California failing to meet the federal compliance review that was conducted back in September of 2009. The feds required us to come back with a program improvement plan. One condition of that plan was that we would provide for additional training. We do feel that this would meet the requirements of that criteria in the plan.
Is that the one that I have notes that says reduced 113,000 or what?
Yes, Madam Chair. We would support.
Is this the $350,000 plan or the $200,000 plan or what?
Yeah, it's $304,000 in total funds.
This?
$160,000 general fund. Yes.
It's 160 general fund and
304,000 total funds.
Total funds. All right. Elio?
We're supportive of the finances approach.
So this would be what?
It would be Senate minus 190.
Yeah.
Senate minus
190.
Senate minus 190 general fund or
Yes.
190
Yeah,
total.
it's minus 433 total, 190 general fund.
Okay. I don't know if you had seen this before. I mean, has everybody had a chance to see this and hear this before right now or not?
We had a conference call.
Was-
Which is different.
This was our recommend, yeah, which was the web-based only. But then they came up with this subsequently.
No, they came up with this. Just the web-based training. We've been told they don't need anything. We want to give them
I don't
a
have a
little
problem
bit.
with this, but I mean, why am I supposed to have a problem? Why am I supposed to have a problem?
We've heard from the counties that they don't need anything.
Pardon?
We've heard from the counties that they don't need anything. We rejected the entire.
All right, I think this proposal was news to at least some of us. I don't know, Republicans, if you'd seen it. We hadn't seen it. We had some thought for how to get minimal compliance without cost. Our proposal had greater savings than Finance's proposal. The issue that is out there is kind of whether there is compliance issues. If Finance thinks this is the minimal amount needed for compliance versus the other suggestion, which had been just the web-based training, which would save more money in the general fund and more money in the total program, would be sufficient to make federal compliance, then there would be a suggestion, I think, to both to only do the web-based deals. LAO, do you have an opinion on whether? I mean, obviously, you're not the federal person. We won't hold you to it, but
I think our thoughts are that some level of resources should be dedicated to this program improvement plan. If the legislature, given the general fund condition, only wanted to approve the web-based training, we would be okay with that as well.
Finance?
Madam Chair, in the discussions we've had with the feds, both components have always been on the table. So I believe the agreement with the feds is we would have a two-pronged approach here. If we back off on one, there's the potential that the next round, when the feds come back and audit us again, if we don't pass, they could impose fairly significant restrictions on us.
Right, so then the question is, how much do we contribute to IC? So it's not a specified thing you have to do for the feds. It's a question of, are you doing something and that then sometime later they'll look back and say, oh gosh, that was good or not. All right. So, but the governor was proposing to spend $1 million, of which $500,000 was general fund, and the issue here was how much savings can we get, without crossing the federal line. And the web-based only gets us down to where we're only saves us what, $300,000 or $400,000?
I believe the web-based cost is $113,000 total
but
funds.
because it's plus, it's confusing me. I can't do the minuses and the pluses. I'm getting my numbers all confused. That's why I'm having trouble. I was reading the 113 as a minus, but it's really an expenditure. That's why I was getting so confused.
Right.
So.
I don't have the general fund breakdown for the web-based training, but it would probably be 50%, 60% less than of the 113.
So the 113 is the total cost of doing that.
That's correct, ma'am.
So then the question is, somewhere between 113 and 500, you could do some of the other thing, right? Some of the other stuff you said you wanted to do. You proposed something that gets you to...
Between 113 and 304, because we're now at 304 total.
You're now
funds.
at 304, okay. So, and we're at 113. Oh, you're at 304 total. I get it. Okay. Well, let's think about that. Okay, let's leave it open and see if we think, I don't know what that number is, but it at least gives us some basis for contemplation. All right. I was getting so confused between what was pluses and what was minuses, I couldn't. Okay. LAO, and then, we're getting there. Oh, we're going to finish human services and then stop. Okay, LAO.
This,
the
issue here in conference is the additional Department of Defense food stamps funding. Essentially,
Put this in here. Have you seen it?
well, we'll get to the paper in a moment, which I didn't do.
What goes with this
The issue, as I understand it, is there was an additional $29 million. What the administration proposed and the Senate did is essentially use that to pay for our increased costs of food stamps administration associated with the dramatic caseload increase. The Assembly has withheld $1 million of that, essentially for potentially other initiatives to make improvements to food stamps, to draw down food stamps, sort of without prejudice to potentially what the Assembly initiatives might accomplish. Given the general fund situation, we're supporting the Senate version. And I see a conference compromise being passed out that I hadn't seen before now.
Proposed compromise.
There was a NIC issue of the, not in conference, was the intercounty transfer because there were bills moving. It looks like perhaps this addresses that.
This is only on the intercounty transfer.
What does that mean? Explain what an intercounty transfer is.
Sure. Nick Buchan, Finance. This was a May revision proposal to For the food stamp program, currently the way it works, if an individual in County A moves to County B, they have to terminate their food stamp benefits in County A and reestablish a whole new case in County B. So
Talk about administrative cost.
Our May revision proposal had trailer bill language to make the food stamp process similar to how it works for CalWorks and Medi-Cal currently. And we're fine with this compromise. The language is slightly different than what we proposed and has a delayed implementation, and we're fine with that.
Okay, so this, let me just make sure we're all on the right page here. This thing that says page 7 compromise is just the intercounty transfer process issue, because I think there's less consensus on the other pieces. So
there's consensus on that.
on this piece, does anybody have any issues? Has everybody seen the trailer? Okay, we're all good. One for finance. Okay, so intercounty transfer on a 4-0 on the Senate side, 5-0 on the Assembly side. Senator Dutton absent. That one will be approved. Okay, and so now the other issues, right? There are other issues because of this.
The other issue is whether to use all of the essentially $29 million federal funds to achieve $10.5 million in savings against the growing costs of the administration of the food stamps program, or whether to reserve $1 million as the Assembly proposes.
Okay, I think this one, there's some whole USDA issue and all sorts of things going on here. So, right, is this the one with the single and the quarterly and the semi-annual and some of those issues?
This funding could be used for improvements and other costs associated with food stamp policy changes, such as changing the reporting period.
But there was some issue with some of it's one-time money and whether you can do
This is one-time money, as I understand it, yes.
Is there anti-supplementation language in here? Can you not supplant?
There is in the federal law. There is no language saying you cannot supplant in the federal law. There was correspondence by, I believe, 2 senators saying
so
they thought it should be that way.
There may be legislative intent, but there's no statutory requirement.
Yes,
is what you're saying.
That is my understanding. Moreover, even if there were, in environments like this where the caseload is growing rapidly, even if there were an anti-supplant language, probably you'd say, no, this would be an acceptable use of funds because the caseload is growing very, very fast. We're in. I think in the budget year it's growing 20%.
So the increased caseload offsets the
It's a use of we're not replacing. We're just trying to deal with a growing problem.
Coping with high unemployment. Coping with the high unemployment and high CalWorks. But there is this USDA exchange with the Director of Social Services on some issues that at least has been brought to my attention. That was from April Finance. Are you aware of all that?
We've seen email correspondence from the federal government indicating that their intent with this funding was to have it consistent with the ARA funding. So as Mr. Bland indicated, we think it's totally consistent with that.
No, I have something else from USDA that indicates that went to Director Wagner, indicating some concerns about some of the elements of our programs and things that may be shifting in terms of how they're evaluating things. So that some of the same folks who propose some of this are concerned about. I think it goes to semi-annual and quarterly and some of the issues we've gone through before. Do we really save money with quarterly? But I understand, is it true that we're the only state left in the world that does quarterly? That like all the states have gone to annual and semi-annual because they save a lot of administrative cost? I mean, there may be some administrative savings that you can do without hurting the food stamps because they're federal. Sorry, it's just one of those. So somebody gave this, I just got it today. So I just think there's let's leave it open to see if there's some resolution to this that one might find, and one might get a chance to read it all and make sure everybody else has read it all. And I just got it today, so I haven't really looked at it either. But
so we'll hold it open.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I think the letter is just suggesting that there are some unintended consequences with regard to the income reporting threshold, which is yet resolved. Right.
Yeah, that's that letter.
Right.
Different issue. Anyway, there's a couple of swirling issues on this one. So anything we can do to maximize federal food stamps to people who need it, good. Anything we can do to cut administrative costs to provide those benefits, good. And let's just see where we can get to. So, all right. All right, whoa, hello. We hit an end. It being almost time for Assemblyman Emerson to become Senator Emerson on the Senate floor. And I know that some members and certainly some staff may be interested in the event that honors Julia Huerta that's tonight. So, and having finished one whole section of something before we launch into health, which is much more trying. And
Can we get Emerson to cast a vote on the Assembly side for the budget before we send him over?
Yeah, you can. If you have one day, we'll take the next. If he'll pass the budget, he could have been the choice person to vote on the budget on both sides in one day if we'd have had a budget ready for him today. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we have a document that's ready for him to vote on, and he is apparently ready to. We went through that one year. Senator Mountjoy stayed in the Assembly for about a month and a half, much against his will one time. So we will go till tomorrow. Does anybody? Tomorrow we will have a goal. We are up on call always around here, but because of some of that and the briefing that's necessary to make sure everybody's ready for tomorrow, we will, and there is some contemplated Assembly floor session in the morning, and I don't know what else committees are going on. So for the moment, we will target commencing at 11 o'clock tomorrow. Probably go a fairly long day. Well, no, we got to stop singing, but probably between whatever number of sessions we do, probably break by 6 or so.
And what are we going to try to get through tonight?
Health, and we'll see where we get. Well, if we get through all the way through health, that'll be good, and we may need mental health assistance by the time we do that. So then the question will be whether we need mental health assistance to get to education, and whether we do Education Friday or whether we can start and think about education. Yes. We will try to start health tomorrow at 11 o'clock, members, as best as possible. Appreciate everybody. Clear the room for reconciliation. And Mr. Leno needs to add on to one item that remained open. Mr. Leno, where'd you go? Don't disappear. No, he didn't. Where'd he go? Mr. Leno needs to be brought back before we adjourn so that he can add on. There's an item that he needed to add on. Okay, no, that's fine. No, we'll wait for him. To wait for Leno to come back, because otherwise we don't have that closed. So, Mr. Leno, we had one item we need you to add on to. Sorry. Okay, page 10 on the public safety agenda. We had one open item for Mr. Leno. Hold on, everybody.
Senator Leno?
Aye.
Okay, that item is now closed, and we can now clear the room for reconciliation. Thank you very much.